Hey, welcome everyone to the Archicad User Monthly Training Webinar for July 2022. My name is Eric Bobrow, as I'm sure you know, and I regret to inform you that our special guest today, Rich Matthews, has taken ill. He sent me an email yesterday saying that he had started having some, I don't know, congestion and runny nose and things, and it was getting worse. He wasn't getting better. And I didn't see the message till late last night. And then I went, oh, shoot, what am I going to do? So anyway, first of all, we won't be looking at Rich's work, unfortunately. So the question is, you've taken the time to come and join me today. What can we do? And I thought, well, how about if we just open the floor, ask me anything? Of course, most of the questions I would expect would be related to Archicad. But of course, if you wanted to ask me something personal or something political, maybe I'll have something interesting to say. Anyway, can you let me know that, first of all, that you can hear me? Type into the questions area go to webinar, your name and where you're located, so I can say hello to you, and then we'll take some questions. And if you are in the Archicad coaching program with me, then you can use Slack to communicate. I'm going to go and make sure that everybody there knows that this is the webinar to connect up with, because we have a separate link for the coaching program. Okay, so I see Mario from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, Ian from Scotland, Tom from Vancouver. All right, the first three already from 3 different continents. Paul in Oregon, Don, Doug from Brooklyn, Yasik, nice to see you. Carmichael, California, not too far away. Jeff from sunny Auckland. Okay, excellent. Indianapolis, DS. Jorge Perez. You're an old friend, I think. All right, Oren, Joel from Concord. All right, so Marquesa, been a while since we've talked. Nicole, Kent Smith. Okay, any thoughts on Archicad 26? I thought you'd never ask. Okay, so, I think we'll open up Archicad 26. I'll share some of my thoughts and observations, and of course, I invite you to chime in. Anyway, Richard from Bermuda, Tom from Doug saying, any thoughts on Graphisoft's recent presentation? Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to at least give you some feedback. So let me open up Archicad, Archicad 26 here, let's see. And I'll talk about some of those things. And feel free to type in other questions if you have something specific, whether it's about 26 or just Archicad, anything that I can help you with, or, just give you some feedback on. I'd be happy to do that. And because we don't have anyone else as a guest presenter, I may just open up the microphone, to some of you who have something interesting to discuss. All right, so I'm going to go, first of all, I'll say create a new project using the Graphisoft standard template here. And I'm using the US version. I've been looking at the international version as well, so that I can be able to support all of you who are in other countries. Let me just see what else, what other comments that we've gotten here. Patrick from Rwanda. Okay, so Tom Rodden, I'm using Archicad 20. This is probably not for me. Okay, that's fine. But Tom, if you want to stick around and you have any questions about Archicad in general, I'm happy to entertain them. It doesn't have to be all about 26. So let me put the Archicad window on this screen here. You should be seeing my screen, I think. There, okay. Looks like it, you can let me know. here. Are you seeing my screen? Let me know. Okay, well, I'm waiting for somebody to confirm that you're seeing my screen. Let me go and open up Graphisoft's website and find where they talk about Archicad 20 or 26. All right, Archicad 26 has arrived. Here's Graphisoft.com. It's interesting, I type in Graphisoft.com, it takes me to the US version of it. It may automatically pick up, my location there. If I refresh this, here's Archicad 26, find out more. Okay, so I'm just gonna make some general comments. Any software company that's been around for more than a little while is going to come out with new versions periodically. It is a way to do two things, I would say, that have overlapping interests. One is it allows the program or tool to improve, stay current, take advantage of new opportunities, new ways that things are being done in the market, or just communicating with other tools, etc. So obviously, new versions we all look forward to as a general rule to say, hey, what's new? What can I do that's easier? What can I do that's, that I couldn't do before? And then secondarily, with most of these companies, you pay for the upgrade, or you may get free upgrades for a certain period of time, and then you pay later, either a la carte or on a regular basis, a subscription. That would be the general term for it. That keeps the company in business, separate from, selling new licenses. So obviously Archicad, Graphisoft has to do that to keep their, everybody working and paid, etc. Now, the third thing that we don't necessarily see in terms of, let's say, new releases is that there can be things that are being done in the background, things that change the foundation of the program that allow down the line new features and functionality to be revealed, used, and possibly even change the strategic equation of, how competitive the product is in the market, who can use it, etc. So that's a third thing that we don't often think about. So when I look at Archicad 26, I say, well, what are the new features? And frankly, they were disappointing to me, and I know to many other longtime users saying, oh, they didn't change this, they didn't change that, and some of the things that they demonstrated, was like, well, okay, so what? There are some things even in my initial use that I am looking at and going, oh, I wouldn't have thought that was useful, but actually that is helpful. And some of those relate to management, and I'll go into management as an area of discussion in a moment. Now, what I haven't looked at the keynote stuff that is the roadmap, but I've read some comments on it, and it's clear that Graphisoft is, in terms of that third area of focus for upgrades, is building out a more extensive infrastructure, tools, and framework for communicating with other software products. For example, engineering and mechanical tools. And I believe Graphisoft was purchased about 15 years ago by Nemetschek. Nemetschek has a portfolio of different software products, and some of them are structural, and I believe that they have now at least one that's a mechanical for heating, ventilation, air conditioning, plumbing, etc. So one of the things that they've been working on is just to make sure that the interchange of information between Archicad and these other disciplines is not only sound, but actually really well thought through. Because, it's one thing to send, like in the old days, your paper drawings or your 2D drawings to an engineer, have them use that as a background, do their design or their layout of things, create their own shop drawings, etc., and it be a separate process. And it can work, it does work, but when you can share the 3D model in the right ways, then in theory, and somewhat increasingly in practice, you can have an extended project team that all are seeing at the right intervals what each other are doing, not every minute, but periodically being able to see the developments and the changes. That was all a long way of saying that Graphisoft is continuing to build out some of the framework that will allow that to happen. And I think the general term is integrated project delivery. At least that's one term I know. It's part of, or it's an extension of BIM, Building Information Modeling, which you should all be familiar with as a term, and the virtual building, which Graphisoft actually coined as a term and is essentially become known as Building Information Modeling, or BIM. Now, the virtual building, when you share it with these other disciplines, there are other different ways that people need to see it. So, for example, engineers do analysis with, I guess, vectors. And I don't really know much about this, but instead of needing and, in fact, being able to use some of the dimensional information that is part of building a building, is it a 2x6 or a 2x12? They have a line that indicates, where the load is and some indication of its strength or its character, but it's just a line in the 3D world. And then when things are connected, a column is sitting on, a beam is sitting on top of a column, etc. Sometimes things are offset because for architectural purposes, it works. The axis line may not be exactly on top. So you have to transfer the load in the way the real world does, through the body of the element. But in this, structural analysis, you have to have a way of offsetting things and the lines touch each other. So setting up ways that automatically and with flexibility connect up the architectural representation of your elements with the structural is a very important thing. And I think Graphisoft's done a lot of thinking to make that straightforward as possible and to make the different disciplines be able to share models and see what they need to see and analyze in the way that's necessary. And the same thing with mechanical, HVAC and ductwork and piping and things like that. There are different things that they need to see to be able to measure, the run lengths, all of the things. And you want to be able to have sort of theoretical representation for the analysis, as well as 3D analysis that says, are these things interfering? Do we have clashes, etc. And I don't really understand these things very well because I focus just on Archicad, but I know in theory that all of this has to be really well thought out. Now, the other thing that we may not think about, some of us who've been in with Archicad for a long time think about, is the position of Graphisoft in the marketplace. So, we all know that Graphisoft is not the biggest developer of architectural software. I believe Autodesk is not only the biggest in the US, but the biggest in the world, although it's dominant in the US and probably not quite so exclusively dominant in other parts of the world. Now, Archicad has a stronger position in Europe and I believe in Japan and some parts of Asia than it does here in the US. Now, what makes companies stick around with their products from Autodesk or from Graphisoft is, well, certainly the tools work well, or how well do they work, and then how well can they work with the consultants, particularly when you're dealing with larger projects and and it's much more complex than, say, residential design. So in order for Graphisoft and Archicad to succeed in the market over the long term, this framework of interoperability is critically important. If Graphisoft only helps the small architects, which have been its bread and butter, and never gets a foothold in the larger firms, then it's never going to be able to develop beyond a certain size. However, with the ability, particularly in places like Japan and Europe, where they're saying, you know what, Autodesk is okay, they're a big company, but they're not, they're in America, and they may even have an antipathy. They may even say, well, we don't want to work with that company. What else is out there? So as Graphisoft can develop a more complete ecosystem, and the larger firms there can, let's say, potentially embrace, and I believe in Japan, we do have a number of larger firms that have adopted Archicad. It puts the company in a better financial position, Graphisoft, and allows over time the market to change. And if we think a little bit about Apple as a company and the wilderness that it was in the 90s, when it made something that there were fans of of Apple, and I was a fan back then as well. But it really was becoming a more marginal player, year by year. And at a certain point, of course, Steve Jobs innovated, and we had the iPod and then the iPhone, and now Apple is, I believe, the largest, public company in the world. Or there may be one or two others that are comparable. But what did they do? Well, they kept to their core philosophy, of think different, make the experience of the user as wonderful and creative as possible. And they also, of course, innovated in terms of creating new ways to use the tools, obviously with music and internet and phone and things like that. Now, over time, they went from being a fringe player to a respected player to a dominant player. Not in every area. I mean, there's still probably more PC users than Mac overall, but in general, Apple's done pretty well. So I hope that Graphisoft's strategies, and they are definitely inspired by Apple because Steve Jobs was helpful in getting the first Macs to Gabor Boyar and his team to develop Archicad. So there's a connection and a lineage there. But I do hope that we all have a long-term sense of what Archicad can be and how it can, over time, become a bigger and bigger player in the market and keep innovating. So that's some very high-level thinking. I hope you found it at least a little bit of interest. I will now just bring up the new features thing and just talk a little bit about what I've noticed here. Actually, I don't really want to play this out loud here. I guess this is a video, but they have, what do they say here? Can I hit play? And so, all right, this isn't gonna help here. I apologize. This whole presentation today, I'm not, I don't have any notes here. But if we look at what they say spend less time on project management and more time on design. Well, how much time do you spend on managing your attributes? Your surface appearance of elements, the building materials, the composites, complex profiles. Well, in a small office, maybe not too much. In a larger office where you have multiple people working and people creating new attributes, new element types for different projects, being able to manage that more easily can be critical, because otherwise you get a mess and you end up with importing things from one project to another and they don't look right, or you end up with templates that are a horrible, mangled, uncoordinated set of materials and things like that. So I have looked at some of the ways that they've improved management there, and I will talk about a couple in relationship to master template, because that's what I've focused on just in the last I don't know, couple of weeks since this was released, is saying, all right, what's going to happen to my passion project of master template? What needs to happen as we migrate things forward? So there are some things about attributes. There's a whole new attribute tool for importing things. There's hierarchy So you can group things in folders, which makes it a lot easier to sort of see which profiles relate to foundation versus walls versus, eave or roof things, or surfaces which are related to stone versus wood versus, something else. So hierarchy and the ability to move that around from one project to another, they've introduced some tools there, which actually I started to appreciate when I was, working with the template and migrating the project. Now, the actual design tools, so here's the attribute management if they talk about that. There are, the fact that they've added sort of search functionality into a lot of different areas, at first seems like, oh, well, so what? But I can see it being really useful. So for example, you want to figure out what layer to put something on, you can type in a few characters in the layer dialog and it'll show the ones that match. Or you can go to a folder, you can click on a folder and find the layers that are in that type, that area, foundation, roof, or site, things like that. In the same way with drawings, if you want to find a drawing, a roof plan or a foundation plan or, plumbing plan or whatever, you can type into the dialog box something like that and it'll show the matches. So you don't have to scroll perhaps endlessly, through things or in a tedious way. So, I think that's actually a real time saver. Enhanced surface overrides here. Well, this is just for the hole tool. I don't see many people using the hole tool in residential construction, but I'm sure in commercial work, you want to be able to cut voids and put things into areas. And this way you can color the backside of an opening and the side separately. To me, that's trivial, but I'm sure it's helpful for some people. The library part maker I have not played with, but if you think about some of the functionality that's built into the standard Archicad library, where you say, I want this window to be divided into 5 spaces vertically, so you have your mullions and transoms, dividers spaced the way you want, and it just sort of does a mathematical thing, saying, all right, well, 1/5 of the way across is this, I'll put a post, etc. Well, you can do that apparently with the library part maker. I haven't used it, but think about creating some components that are repeated on some frequency that have certain dimensions that are parametric, so you can make it thicker or thinner, taller, shorter, possibly, of course, change surface materials, appearance of things. So again, I'm looking forward to experimenting with that. All of these things, in terms of what they're doing, have in general been available in the GDL, the tools within Archicad, within, for programmers to create library parts. But this is for, I'm going to say, mere mortals or architects to create parametric elements. Customized kitchen cabinetry. They did a couple of improvements. One thing had just come up a couple of weeks ago in my Archicad coaching program calls, was someone saying, well, I want to be able to show the opening direction of the doors. And you can do that, of course, in an elevation. You'll see that for windows and actual, full doorways. But I was looking in the cabinets and saying, I thought you could do it. And well, they've added that in. There was one person on the call who said, well, you don't really need that. You can see where the handle is. And of course, the handle does correspond, but having this line, so that's a nice little improvement. Not something to write home about. Improved 2D editing. They only demonstrate or talk about this thing where you have curved elements and you're getting a copy of something, that has a larger radius or a smaller radius. I don't know if there's anything else in here, but several people in the, veteran users said, oh boy, if that's what they're shouting about, that they didn't do very much about anything else. So anyway, I will be looking to see, because occasionally there are things that they don't put in the headlines, but then you find out later, oh, it also does such and such. All right, so I'm just going through what I see here. Visualization, okay, so they have a new improved surface catalog. I have not experimented with that, but the images are starting to look better and better. These are native within Archicad. Well, BIMX, I don't know how many of you are using that, but you can export your model in an independent file that non-Archicad users can access, whether they're clients or consultants, and move around in 3D. And they've improved the visualization. And the images I saw were like, oh, wow, this has really gone from total cartoon to just something, sort of like a video game, level of realism. So I think that's nice because expectations of the visual representation are getting higher and higher as we see more movies with CGI, computer graphics stuff. Anyway, so they've got some stuff with BIMX that looks pretty good. And yeah, I mean, if you look at this, this looks noticeably better than previous versions. And if it's just easy to export that from your Archicad model and send it to a client so that they can walk through the current version of the design, I think that's pretty good. The collaboration talked about, just some of the underpinnings of the ability to share the virtual building model, the building information model with other disciplines. I have not looked at, how the collaboration tools work, but in general, I'm sure they're resolving some of the issues in terms of file size and speed, while also managing the different representation styles that are required for the different disciplines. And ultimately, the ideal is that other disciplines can use their own tools, but participate in an actively evolving digital model, and with as few compromises as possible, so that it's they end up all the stuff that you want to see or need to see is there. Okay. So they have the structural workflows and load calculations here, or at least putting in, some load information and being able to update that. And I have no idea what Frillo is. I mean, it's some tool that Nemetschek, I think, has, and structural analytical. I don't know what the F is, filter or something. SAF, structural analytical something. All right, support for multi-segmented columns and beams. So these were introduced, multi-segmented columns and beams were introduced in 1 or 2 versions back, and apparently that now can handle the structural implications of that. BIM Cloud is Graphisoft's tool for managing shared projects in this digital model that multiple people or companies can participate in. So some of these things that you may never use if you are a sole practitioner, or you just have 2 people in your office and you're each working on your own project, or you open up a project and work on it and close it and somebody else opens it. You may never use BIM Cloud, but I have heard good things about their service. So whether you're wanting to share within an office or with a remote workforce like we've had in COVID so much, or just simply having outsourced people in different locations, you can now request and pay a very modest amount to have your project or projects up in the cloud that Graphisoft manages. And then you get access, and your team can get access through the cloud. And last I heard it was something like $400 a year or $75 a month, something like that, for that access. And you can check with your Graphisoft reseller or with your Graphisoft rep to find out about it. But it is, I think it's actually pretty cool that you can just pay for a service that's pretty reasonably priced and be able to collaborate remotely. Building energy evaluations. Now, this is an area that years ago when I was a reseller, we had started to introduce, what was it called? It was Eco Designer. So Eco Designer and then Eco Designer Star or something like that, which started to do some analysis of, well, these walls have a certain insulation value, the roof has this, and what would be the heat flow, how much energy would it take to maintain the environment, etc. Now the problem with the efforts done at that point was they were cumbersome to manage the spaces because you had to create zones that had certain rules for how each room or area or volume related to other ones, and whether the zone went out to the skin of the building or to some other point, I can't remember, but there were some cumbersome things that were, let's say, tricky to manage, and the data was not certified, even though it was at least somewhat indicative of energy usage. You couldn't generate something that you could submit to, let's say Title 24, I think is what it's called in California, if I'm not mistaken, where it says this building complies with certain energy efficiency requirements. So it didn't have that built in. Now they appear to be coming back to it. Obviously, climate change is continuing and accelerating as an issue. And at least in Germany, they have now certified, from what I understand, certified reports coming out of Archicad. And of course, if they put in the real effort to get things optimized for the German reporting system, then at least in theory, they can generalize it and make variations for getting reporting in other systems. So I'm glad to see them doing that. When it would be, particularly useful if you're a passive house designer or you're in, particular jurisdiction in the US, I don't know. But I'm glad that they're featuring that because, well, we all know that we need to do our part in terms of design to reduce energy usage and slow down the climate change. All right, documentation stuff here. Auto text for master layout, very minor change here, just I don't know, a handful of new field references that you can put on. Now, auto text, for those of you who are less familiar with Archicad and the names of things, is what allows certain textual information, words or characters, to relate to the context. So one type of auto text would be the sheet number that is automatically, you place it on the layout master, and as you create new masters or renumber or organize the sheets, it has the right number. Another one would be the drawing title, which relates to the name of the drawing or the view in previous steps. Other information can be scale, can be notes from things, so you can actually associate text information for elements, structural information. So they've got a few more things related to the layouts. And one thing that looked sort of interesting was, I think, if you've ever said, hey, I'm printing out 8 sheets for this meeting or this submission, and my actual full project is 30 sheets or 100 sheets, how can you get it, at least temporarily, to say this is sheet 1 of 8, sheet 2 of 8, etc. And so I believe that there's something in there that allows you to specify the number of sheets in a certain area of the layout book. I haven't looked at the details, but it may allow you to have more stuff in the layout book that you're not printing, but still have a particular issue, PDF or printed, reflect, what you're doing. So I think that's useful. All right, graphic override enhancements. They have some things now that allow you to more quickly select multiple things that you want to apply. So these can just make it easier to use the graphic overrides just faster and less annoying that you have to pick one at a time and another one and then another one. So sort of a minor thing, depending on how often you're tweaking your graphic overrides, but certainly for the power users like me, it's like, oh, okay, that makes this task take 1 minute instead of 5 minutes or something. All right. Now, level dimensions updates. This is a nice thing. It resolves an annoyance that I've seen so frequently, and have people ask me about how do you get, level information in the way that you need, and they've answered that question, and they've sort of raised the capabilities even a little further than what I would have imagined. So previously, up until this point, if you were to put level references on your site mesh, it would by default show a relationship of that point of the terrain to your project 0. What do you call it? Way too much. Sorry, I'm just looking at a note here. Doug saying way too much time on attributes, etc. Okay. I'm not sure whether you're Doug. You're saying I was spending way too much time, or Graphisoft has done it. Now audio breaking up. Okay, that was half an hour ago. Let me know how the audio is. I hope I'm coming through clearly. Anyhow, so up until this point, level references would be based on project 0. So if you said my project 0 is, is the top of the ground floor slab, then you'd be seeing references either below or above that. But very often you want to have a level reference in relationship to sea level or the Australian height datum, AHD. And so you could manually change the reference each point one at a time, or there was a sort of a little hack that you could select all of the level points and change them at once if you did it in just the right way. But now you can set up a preference that says, hey, when I put on a level dimension point with this favorite setting, it should reference sea level. It's not something to write home about. It should have done that already, a long time ago, but it's good that it's there. Resolves an annoyance. PDF import enhancements. You can bring in multiple pages of a PDF instead of one at a time and lay them out, on a larger sheet. I know people do that in California for the Title 24, these reports that are, energy efficiency, and they may have 3 or 6 pages on a layout. So instead of having to go import multiple times or drag copies and then say, oh, don't put page 2 on it, put page 3. Now you can say, as you can see the picture, all of these, and it will lay them out. And given that we already have some things where if you're doing some auto layout, it can create new layout sheets. You could bring in 10 or 20 sheets at a time, and they would just create new layouts when they fill up the sheet. So that's sort of an overview of an overview, and my perspective on some of the things that I see more useful and less. So I'm going to check on questions to see if any of you have questions on what I said or on, Archicad in general. And then I will talk a little bit about project migration. In other words, how do you take your project from 25 to 26 or from 20 to 26, and what things to be aware of, at least the things that I know at this point. So let's just see here. Okay, so audio is fine. Everybody's been saying that, so that's good. All right. Jorge says, hey, it's been a long time. Yeah, so it is Jorge Perez. Okay, nice to see you. Has Archicad 26 added keynotes like CAD image? No, I don't see any reference to that. So for those of you who don't know the background of that, so you know that you can add information in relationship to building elements with notes on the sheet. You can have, of course, legends or explanatory things saying, when I use this code, that means this type of wall or this type of beam or this type of, something or another. And that information, of course, you can compile manually. You can have information pulled from the elements where there's something that says, hey, whenever I put a note next to this wall, the wall type is this or the short code is that, and then there's a longer note that's associated as well. So within Archicad, we can have schedules that report different information about elements, and you could have, a list of different codes, short codes and long explanations, and you can have that in a schedule that you then place on a sheet. What CAD Image Keynotes does is it gives a more robust way to create a database of these notes that you can use from project to project and customize in any individual project. And it can even pick up that only the following 18 notes are on this sheet. There are 3 drawings on the sheet, and these are the 18 notes that we're seeing, as opposed to having to manually choose them in a report or show all of the notes when only some of them are referenced. So it's really nice in that it can pick up that information. Now, CAD Image is a company based in New Zealand, and I think it's now owned by an Australian company. It was originally affiliated with the New Zealand distributor of Archicad, that was Graphisoft New Zealand or something. I'm not quite sure if it's independent or not, because that New Zealand distributor was bought by the Australian one, and now they, I think they're managed together. Regardless, CAD Image has a long history of creating interesting and useful products. They do charge money for it. That, of course, keeps them in business. And so Keynote, has a charge for it. But I do recommend it. It's very powerful. So there's none of that functionality. But what I've seen people do as an alternative is to use the a system where you add information to elements in the form of custom properties, and those properties can have short, they can be like a short code, they can be longer ones, fairly, fair number of words. I don't know how many characters it's limited to, and you can have schedules that will report on them, either electrical or just the ones that like that. Similar functionality, not quite as much graphic control as they have, because they can do indents and bold text and different things, and make a nicely formatted report. Okay, so that's waving my hands. Hopefully your mental picture was reasonably good. Okay. All right, Stuart says, what happened to the guest presenter? Unfortunately, Rich Matthews called in sick. Literally yesterday, sent me an email saying, I've come down with something. I don't think I'm going to get better. I'll let you know. And then he sent me another one. He said, yeah, I'm going to have to cancel or postpone. I didn't even see the note until late last night. And so I wasn't able to send out an email today because I was slammed. So I will have Rich Matthews come sometime soon. He can't do it next week because I think he's having some eye surgery or something like that, maybe cataract or something. But maybe I'll have him in the August timeframe. So I apologize. So this session, as I said at the beginning, ask me anything. One question, which was very natural, is what do you think of Archicad 26? So I've been, rhapsodizing at length, or at least, sharing my perspective. But I am open to other questions. I can bring up Archicad 26. I will show you a little bit about project migration, some things I've noticed, and a few of the features that I've played around with that I think, at least a little explanation from me might be helpful. All right. So I do see, yes, Henry, you also had the same question, saying you joined late. Is Rich Matthews still going to be joining? Not today, unfortunately. Okay. All right, so Andrew Reek said, waiting for solo version. Okay, I'm guessing that what you mean is Archicad 26, maybe they come out with the main version and then they, some point before too long, they'll come out with a version for solo users. And for those of you who don't know solo, from what I understand, and I'm no longer a reseller, I was for 20 years, but so I don't know everything about everything. But from what I understand, it's basically Archicad without teamwork, without the BIM cloud functionality. And it may also eliminate some of the other collaboration tools like XREFs, where you bring in an AutoCAD drawing and it can be updated automatically. And hot-link modules, I think, may also be eliminated there. So you can't bring in something from another Archicad project and keep it up to date automatically. You can merge something in, but if you need to update it, it won't update. So it's there by the name you gather it's for the sole practitioner working solo who isn't regularly requiring updates from a team, fast-paced. So one side note, my master template had been set up so that it required, for full functionality, it required the teamwork ability to hot link things. In version 25, I changed some of the things that I set up, and it now works perfectly well with solo as well. And in terms of master template, I'm working on that update. I think the basic version I should be able to get done within another couple of weeks. I am looking at two types of enhancements, two types of developments. One is, on the one hand, creating a simpler, lighter version of master template so that it's not as complex and easier to approach and get going, particularly for people who are, let's say, less sophisticated, less experienced. And well, doing that while still maintaining the ability to have a very robust, rich template. And then secondly, how can I make the new version even more robust and rich, just have more resources that are useful. So any of you who would like to give me some feedback or have a little meeting with me to look at things and talk about things, I welcome you to send me an email to support@bobrow.com. And I'll say that there are two things that I'm looking for. One is people who are newer or less experienced, or just manage a firm where they have less experienced people. And I want to make sure that the simpler version satisfies needs properly. So just give me feedback. How does this look? Would you need X, Y, and Z, or can you live with just X? Things like that. So that's feedback and discussion on a simplified version. And then secondly, for those of you who, say, I've always wanted to have X in the template, or I've added these three things to my template, maybe I can share them with Eric and other people can benefit. That's the other thing I want to, add some more functionality to master template. So if you, in the goodness of your heart, and I'll certainly reward you with my appreciation, as well as perhaps some extra time helping you with some challenges that you have. If you'd like to at least have a conversation with me about it, just send me a line, drop me a line at support@bobrow.com. All right, let's see here. Okay, any progress on zones and sections? Zones and sections are visible. I will show you how that works, Gustavo. And Kent says, is there a version of master template coming out for 26? Yes, that's what I was just discussing. I should have something within the next couple of weeks that I can at least make available. While still aiming to develop some more functions that can be bolted on. So that's my current idea, is that I'll have a phased release. One will be full compatibility, some minor updates and improvements, and then a second one that'll say, oh, here's some new things that are now available in the full version of the template that you can add if you rushed into the first release. So I'll try to make it as graceful and easy as possible to get it quick, but also still be able to get whatever I end up with. All right. Okay, so Diego says there's already a solo version available on the Graphisoft store, at least for my region. So this would be Archicad Solo, the feature limited, or the version that takes out a few features. All right, that's good to know. All right, so Suleiman asked me can I do a brief take on graphic override? Sure, I'd be happy to do that as part of today's session. And he also says, I hear version 26 has gone more into structural integration. Can you develop on that? I did talk a little earlier about what, what structural integration might refer to in terms of that, but I don't know enough to be able to really explain. I think watch some of the videos that Graphisoft has on that. And then if you have a specific question, like, I don't know what they mean by this, I may be able to look at that. All right, so David Uguchi says, regarding Project Zero, I'm not quite sure what, maybe you're going to fill in the rest of your question, David, in a moment. So I will talk about that. All right, so questions that I see posted so far, that I want to get to, haven't talked yet. Zones and sections, graphic overrides, just some talk about that. And then I know I wanted to talk about project migration. So let us see here, and I want to check in Slack here. Okay, so I do see some of our Archicad coaching people one person, Colin, saying, I can't get on the call today. Message says waiting for organizers. So I think he's on the wrong call, which is too bad, but he just posted that there. Let me just get him the information for this, because I know he's registered here. So just one moment, I'll get him his link. Hopefully here, so there he is, copy. So let me just write this note to him. Okay, so I did that. Okay, Steve has a comment about high-level thinking. Okay, and then Nestor, you have a question about how to apply a concrete roof tile. So this, I assume, I will get to in the Archicad coaching program section after 3 o'clock. Okay, so let me go now, and I'm going to go here to master templates sample project. Okay, so let me open that here. Actually, that's a template. Okay, let me get the sample project open. So question in terms of seeing zones in sections and in terms of graphic overrides, that'll be what I'll focus on for the next few minutes. And then I'll talk about project migration things. But so, all right, this is, yeah, this is not a sample project. This is just a small little piece of building to give some context when you first open up master template. But let me open up the sample project here. That gives me a good context for answering questions. So for those of you who may not be familiar with it, master template gives you a starting point for projects. It doesn't provide a project. I mean, you're going to be putting in your own project, but I do have a sample project developed quite a few years ago now by architect Scott Bulmer in California, who was working as a consultant for me at the time. And it's a little California bungalow, but it does provide context for, let's say, showing what graphic overrides will do or other things, and shows how you can do certain types of complex profiles to create beautiful sections, etc. So I use it a lot as part of my teaching because I've carefully cultivated lots of different pieces as an educational tool. So for those of you who are less familiar, so the project itself here, I'm trying to get, there we go. Okay. So nothing too imposing or dramatic, but it has a lot of little fine details here. Now, I'm going to show one example. I hope that this is fully set up. Sometimes I try to demonstrate something, and because this is now in 26, maybe something isn't going to work. But let me do this in terms of more 3D views here. 3D styles and model variations. Let's see there. Color pen, no, let's see. Oh, actually, let's just see. This would be energy here. Okay. So you see here, this is one of the new features. I'm trying to find a particular view. And in this case, I typed in the word energy because I knew that I have some reports here, some schedules that are about energy analysis. And if I go to energy summary like this, it's not an exhaustive energy summary. What it is in this case, we'll just and I'll just shrink this down here. We have a bunch of doors and windows and walls that are designated as east, some that are designated as north, and some that are designated, in each of the directions, south, west, south, and west. And this is able to then calculate, this particular schedule is able to calculate the area of the walls and the area of the openings. And this is useful information. It's at least contributes to some of the data that you would do for energy analysis in the state of California. You're saying how much glazing, how much, non-insulated areas are there, and you can calculate based on it. Now, of course, how does it know that a wall is east or a window or door is east? Well, if I go to this wall and I say, show it to me on the plan here, we'll see this wall is highlighted, okay? And this wall, I've manually gone in and I've set up a custom field. So in master template, I've got some custom fields specifically for this purpose, or custom property. And one of them, in terms of AMT as Archicad master template, is the orientation. And it says the orientation is east. Now I can choose one of the other directions, and I can also say, hey, it's interior, meaning, it's not relevant to this type of exterior calculation. And if when we first draw a wall, it'll be undefined. It will not be any of these, and therefore it would also not show up in the schedule because it's undefined. Or it'll show up actually, I think, saying undefined, and then you can go find them and make it right. Now is this east? Well, in this sample project, east is to the right. Do I have all of the walls designated properly? Well, it'd be tedious to go and select each wall, particularly in a large project. So it's nice to be able to visualize this in, what do you call it, in 3D to say, am I getting it right? So if I go to the 3D view and I take a graphic override here that is energy orientation check. All right, so this is going to instantly recolor the walls and doors and windows to indicate what direction has been designated. So I'm going to click on this, and you're going to see, okay, so in this case, it apparently is, I don't have this set up right in this sample project. So something went wrong here because they're all the same color. Let me go to the graphic override rules and let me fix this. Hopefully I can do this quickly, and you'll learn a little bit about the rules. All right, so if I click on this little button here next to the pop-up that is the current graphic override, I have something saying, All right, if the orientation is north, make it this color. If the orientation is south, make it that color. So these are some visual, text representation here and some visual images. Now, let me check. Let's say I don't have any, let's see, we have, if this is, I think this should be south. So why is the south not this color? Let me go and click on it and say, well, it says, okay. It says if it's a wall, door, or window and the property is something, then it'll make it the right color. So for some reason, this missing property is, so something got broken along the way and I need to fix it. All right, so what I'm going to do is say, you know what, I'm going to color it this color here when the property is energy. Here, do we have stored energy? No, maybe it's orientation. It's orientation. So you can see I can type in a search here. I think you could do that already, but I'm not sure. Maybe this was added as well. So I'll say the orientation is, and we're going to say that this is, it says this rule is for south, so I'm going to fix that. And then I'm going to get rid of this other one that the property somehow got removed and I didn't fix that. All right, so now when I do this and I say, okay, we should, maybe we have to rebuild here. Refresh, rebuild. No. All right, well, that didn't do it. Let's see, is this, what direction is this? So we'll see if I can get this. This orientation is east, okay. And this one, the orientation is south. Okay, so we have east and south. Let's just see, the south should have changed color here. Energy orientation check there. Okay, well, let's see what's going on. So it should be energy orientation check south should have this color here. So if it's a wall or a door or a window and the orientation is south, then we want to make the surface change here. So that should work. I'm just going to fix the other ones quickly because now I know what it is. But west, we're going to say add orientation, and this is going to be west. And then I remove this one. It's one of these. So it's more of these, and this, yeah, this should be all right. Yellow. And let's go to the east. And missing property. So it might have to do with the last one that was missing. So I think I have to fix them all, which will just take another 30 seconds here. So I'll remove this and I'll add orient here. And if I can pull the rabbit out of the hat, this will be great. East here. And then I think this north one, I think the problem is that north, it's applying it after all the other ones, and it was basically applying it to all the walls. So I'm gonna say add again here. So hopefully this will be clear in just a moment. This is going to be if the orientation is north. Okay. Oh, okay. Hooray. Rabbit out of hat. Okay, so what it is basically now when I go around, we can see, did I get all of these in the right orientation? So clearly I did not change the model. I did not redraw the walls. I simply said for a certain type of presentation or study purpose, I want to make sure that everything makes sense. So let's take this window and say that it's actually not the orientation south. Let's say that I accidentally had it on east, okay? Now when I'm looking at it, we're gonna see it jumps out. Hey, that's the wrong one. It's not matching there. So I can go in and find the ones that are wrong and say that I really need to change this to, I think it was south, if I'm not mistaken. Let's do that. And I can select multiple ones like that. So this is one graphic override. So the rule in a graphic override is you say, a rule says look for certain types of elements, and then if it matches that, change its appearance, at least while this override is active. You can use this for different purposes. I'll show you another one that's more dramatic. Well, this is dramatic, but another one here, we can say cardboard model. All right, so that changes the look of everything. Well, what is it doing? The cardboard model is it saying that if it's an uncut surface, right now we're not cutting through anything. What is the rule? The rule is anything that's 3D, give it a white color. Okay, so that very simple one rule did it. And there's a separate one for when you cut through it. Now let's look at another one that's more for, see-through walls. Okay, so you can see now we're looking at the building somewhat like it originally was, except the walls have been turned into glass or airspace. I can't remember which it is. We'll just go in here and say see-through walls. The rule, which I can look at or edit, says if it's a wall, make it clear glass, which is different than airspace. Clear glass, you can actually see just a little bit of a haze, there, as opposed to airspace, which would mean it would totally disappear. Now, we can use it for things like structural. Let's see, there's structural highlighted. So all of these walls are structural, but inside the building, now if we were to take an interior view, let's go to an interior view here. So let's say we have an interior view. Now this turned off, that save view turned off the graphic override. If I say give me the structural, where is it? Structural highlighted. We'll see what's structural, so we can see the furniture, of course, is not structural. And then I think here, there's some interior partitions that are not designated as structural. And I don't know, maybe the stairs should be considered structural. I don't know. This is just a demonstration file, so it's really just to show different things. If we go to something, let's go to another type of graphic override, which is used in plan. So if I go back to, let's say, the floor plan, here, let's see, first floor plan, and we look at it. So what are we seeing right now? We're seeing the walls with some detail indicating that they're insulated, that they have some certain skins. Well, with the graphic override, we can say, I would like to have this look like a site plan. All right, so now it's just empty walls. We're seeing some grid lines through here, but basically they're empty walls there because we're designating, the change in the look there. Or if we look at something like a sketchy line, this is actually something that goes in and says, hey, let's see, wrong one here. I would like to change the lines that normally would be straight into a sketch line. So those are a few different examples. We can also have the same thing preset in a view. So if I go to an elevation, let's see, sketch and schematic. So in master template, I have a bunch of examples here. So schematic elevations. So if I take an elevation here, so in the schematic version of the elevation, it removes the details of the doors and window and just makes everything just plain white. Whereas in the sketch version of the same one, it makes it a little bit wobbly, which, at the right magnification can give just a little bit of a hand-drawn effect. And then of course, if I have, if I turn that off, if I have the elevations without that, then you can see that this is now showing, more detail and of course a traditional sort of view. All right, so hopefully that explains graphic overrides. Now, what they have new in 26, I'll just say is if I'm in the graphic override dialog here and I want to add graphic override saying I want to do more things here, instead of just picking one at a time, you can literally pick several things and then say add them. So that's what they did is they said, all right, sometimes you want to compile a bunch of them that will all add up. And so let's allow you to select multiple ones rather than having to do one at a time. I think that's the main thing. They also changed it from edit rules to manage rules, a couple other small things there. So that's the main thing there. Now, viewing in section, the zone, I'm going to have to bring up a section here. Okay, so we don't know what room we're cutting through here and what room we're cutting through there or whatever, but there is a zone. Now, if I go check the layers here, the layers here are we have the zones. Our area identifier zone is visible. So that means that my zone layer is turned on. But I don't see anything that designates what a zone is. Now I can't remember, I'm gonna go and say, look at the section settings. I don't think it's in there, I'm not sure. Model appearance, where zones are. I think that it might be in model view options. Okay, where is it? Shows zone stamps. Okay, so right now that would show it on the plan when we're in construction documents. So it's not there. I select this. This is a wall. Yeah, there's not a zone that's visible. Trying to remember, is it under project preferences, legacy? Here, hide zones. Okay, so I think the default that they have is saying, you know what, people would get confused by this. If they do need this, then you have to turn this off. This says hide zones. Okay, so now I'll say okay. Now you can see all of a sudden some of the information has disappeared, which actually is awkward, right? But now if I hover over this, what is this? It's allowing me to select a zone. Now, as a zone, I can label it to show what its name is. So let me just show that. If I go to the label tool here, and I hover over, let's say this is a zone right now, and right now it's got an arrow. I'll remove the arrow in a moment, but I'm going to go to the auto text, and we'll say zone here, and I want might be related zone name. And you can see it says sleeping. Okay. I don't want to do it twice. It just put it in twice there. Now let me get rid of the arrow here. My info box is, oh, let's see, I have to finish it. And then now I can select this and say, you know what, I don't want the leader line, I just want that. And maybe I want it in a frame here, around that. Now I'm going to eyedrop this here. And now I go over to this area and it says living room. Okay, so now you can see the power of it in certain contexts where you're cutting through sections and you want to be able to say what the room, it's room 105, or lobby or, storage unit 1, things like that. So this was a label that was that I said, show me the zone name. Now, one thing that we're seeing right here is that the zone is blocking the view of the stair, right? Now, I'm trying to remember what the solution is here. If I go to section settings, I think that if we turn on transparency, let's see, transparency, that might resolve it at the cost of some other complication. Let's say okay. No, it's not resolving that. Let's just look at the zone. And zones, when they're visualized in 3D, have a let's see, a category. They have an appearance in the model. And right now, this is glass blue here. So I'm just going to change this to airspace right now, because airspace we can see through, and just see if that fixes the issue in this case. Yes, okay, so we're seeing through, you know, I've said it's glass, I'm sorry, it's airspace, but it's we can see through it. Now we're seeing through the zone. I'm not sure whether we're seeing through the window, because there's probably not a lot of detail behind there in this model, but there could be some complications where we're seeing through doors or windows, and that we don't want to. So I haven't experimented with this too much, given that setting that I just changed, which is in the options, project preferences, legacy, that this is global for this project. If we say don't hide zones on section type views, then we may have this issue that we're seeing through certain you know, doors and windows, for example, if we have A, transparency, and B, now let's just see if, can I turn off transparency? Let's see, we go to section settings and say transparency. I'm going to turn that off and see what happens. Yeah, so we need transparency, and we need a zone that, or to have the zone be set as a very transparent element. And of course that works nicely here. We have two compromises. One is that if we ever do a bubble diagram with the zones in 3D to show the spatial usage, you may be limited to things that are very transparent as opposed to translucent, to be able to see through. And secondly, you may be seeing through whenever you want to see these zones and you turn on transparency, you may be seeing through doors and windows and things, possibly to rooms beyond. So that's at least another potential complication. All right, so hopefully that's of interest. Okay. All right, so now I see some questions, other questions like from Jacek and David Yaguchi and Saxon. Okay. So Suleiman says, how do you activate the graphic override command? Okay, so just to finish up graphic overrides, if we are always in a context in Archicad. In other words, you're seeing part of the model, part of the project from this elevation or this plan or, you know, whatever we're looking at. And we have certain other contexts like what layers are turned on, what scale, if we're in a drawing type view as opposed to a 3D view, etc. So all of those things you can change manually. And I went down to the little quick options bar here, and I changed graphic overrides manually from one to another. I just demonstrated a few different things. Now each view has graphic overrides as part of it. So here I am in a section view. When I go to the settings, it says what graphic override do I want to have active whenever I double click it or whenever I place this drawing on a sheet, this view onto a sheet. So to activate a graphic override, you either temporarily change it here or through the document menu, there's a similar place up here, and or you set it up in in your view settings, model view options. If you, I'm sorry, graphic override options. Now there is an option here that says no overrides, and then Archicad is going to show things in their what we would call their natural appearance. Whatever you've specified for each element will be shown as best possible. So graphic overrides you can associate with the view when you want to either quickly bring them up or you want to use them as part of creating drawings. So, okay, so that's how you activate graphic overrides. All right, so now we have a few other questions here. And for those of you who came in late, again, Rich Matthews is sick, so I'm just doing a Ask Me Anything session. All right, so, okay, so David Yuguchi says, regarding Project Zero, so there's a long note here, so let me try to read it out loud and figure out what the question is. I noticed that Project Zero set as a specific elevation in project preferences. This palette also has a column called relative, which you don't know how that functions. The sea level line seems to refer to project location. Story settings appear to be directly relative to Project Zero. Okay, so okay, if I set a project at a particular elevation of above sea level in my location settings, and I want to change that elevation of sea level for my project to be higher, can I change that in project location, and will that automatically move my model higher? Okay, good question. It's actually a little simpler than you might think. Let's take a look in, well, we have this interior view. Let's go to just an axo view. Okay, and so we have a site mesh in this project, and if I go to the measure tool and I hover over this, it says that this point in space is z coordinate -1'4". Okay, now what is that? -1'4", so like half a meter down from the floor level here. So it's 1'4" down from the ground floor, from Project Zero. So how do we know what Project Zero is, and how do we get elevations related to sea level? So if I go to the options menu, project preferences, and look at location settings, and I think this may have somewhat different names in other versions of Archicad. I don't know if it might just say location, or it might say project location, or I don't know, but location settings. And we say, all right, what's the elevation? All right, so right now this is set at 102.67 feet. You may recognize 0.67 is 2/3, so that's 102 feet and 8 inches above sea level. Okay, now if I go and select a wall, well, let's pick, see, these all have our complex profile. But all right, so we'll just select this wall, and it says that its base reference is 0 in relationship to the Project Zero, and that it goes up 9 feet. Now I can also say, where is it in relationship to sea level? Well, remember I had it as 102 feet 8 inches. It's going to say that, 102 feet 8 inches. So it knows in relationship to sea level where we are. Now, if I were to put in, if I go to the site plan here, so site plan. Okay, so this site plan drawing here has some spot elevations, 102, 104, etc. And you know, 101.33, that's this. So when I put in a, what do you call it, a level elevation point here, and I just click to place it, it says 0.842 feet. Now, what is that? Well, that means this is just slightly above. It's not quite a foot above the floor level. Well, that's not too useful in this case, because grade, we'd want to be in sea level. Maybe we'd want to say that the, you know, a mezzanine is, you know, or a landing is so many feet above the floor level. But here I want to change it. So I'm going to go and select this marker, and say, how do I want the text to be? It says single value. So this is new in 26. And I can say visible top to sea level. Okay, so this is brand new. There was a way to do this by editing the text itself, but now you can change it in the marker. So now I say change it to that. It says 103.509. Okay, so it's the right number. Of course, it's not showing it, well, it's showing it in decimal, which is what all of these are. So right now we are showing elevations in decimal. Why? Because in the site plan, I think that's what it's set at. If I go to my, let's see, it would be under document, and it would be under options, project preferences, dimensions, and right now in site survey, the level dimensions are set as decimal feet. So if I wanted to, I could just say, well, what would it look like if I switch this to be feet and fractional inches? Probably not what you want here, but let's just do that. Now you can see 1036, and that at least is updated. I think this text here might be fixed as opposed to something live. Anyway, so that was just on the fly changing my dimensions to a custom setting, whereas when I was in the site setting, it was set up to be decimal feet and there. All right, so now, so this says single value, and we can also have multi-line, and then you can say, then there's some other options here. And I don't want, Graphisoft does teach you how to do this, but I'm going to say that most of the time people will want just a single line, and they'll want the top to show relative to either project zero or to sea level. And once I've got that set, then I can use that as a preference for all future dimension things. Now, getting to your question, David, suppose we realized that the site was set incorrectly, or maybe we don't even have a site, we just have the building design, and we're going to put it in a new location, a new site. Well, what I can do is I can go to the options, project preferences, location settings, and I can say, you know what? Actually, the new site, it's going to be up at 125. Okay. Now, what happens when I do this? It simply makes a note that sea level is a different distance away from the project zero. Everything within the project is based on project zero, meaning all of the elements like the walls, roofs, slabs, etc., just stay still because we haven't moved them. We've just said sea level is further down. So I'm going to say okay. We don't see any change here. If I go to the 3D view, we won't see any change here. But now if I were to measure this point here, what does it say? It says Z coordinate minus 1'4". That's again 1'4" below that. But if I go back to the floor plan here and we zoom in on it, it says it's 125. So basically it's simply saying, oh, if you're telling me to give you the distance from sea level, I will happily tell you that is 125 feet. Okay, so that's what happens when you change the project location. Now, there is another area that you were asking about, reference levels. So if I go to project preferences, and there's something called, where are they now? Reference levels here. All right, so you can see there's the minus 125. Now, it is gray here because you can't change it here. You have to change it in that other place, the project location. And can we even get there? You can't get there from here. You have to go back to that menu that I had. Anyway, so this is locked. Project zero is also locked because project zero by definition is zero. Now, what are these datum points and altitude points? Okay, you can rename this anything you like. Maybe this is street level, and street level is minus 6'8" below my ground floor. Cool. You're just saying the street level is this distance. Now, anything that I put in here, and you're limited to 2 extra references, you can pull up in a dialog box, meaning you can see or set the height of something relative to a point of interest. So that might be in relationship to some survey point or some, point on your property that you can't be above that more than a certain amount, or, other things. It might be related to, an adjoining building, or some other hardscape, anything that you want. So anything you want to just have an easy way to reference and say, well, how is it in relationship to that? You can define in here, and you define it in relationship to project 0. Now, if we say this is, well, I'm going to say limit here, and let's say that it was 28'6", all right, you see how this word jumps up. So it'll keep these in order of height, elevation there. And then you can say, well, what's the peak of my roof in relationship to the limit? And you say, oh, it's -2 feet. Okay, good. We still are below the limit. Okay, so hopefully that explains that. Okay, so David Uguchi. So now, David, you said the wall is relative to the story, not project 0. My point is, what would it take to raise the entire building relative to existing grade? All right, now that's a different question. Raising the entire building relative to existing grade, you could basically go into 3D, turn on the building, either hide or lock the grade, and literally drag it up. You can, select all the stuff in 3D and say elevate, and you can move things up. So I will demonstrate 2 different ways to do that. We could have another 20 minutes on this, but let's just do something really quick. I don't know if I have all the layers turned on, but I certainly have most of them on right at the moment for visualization. I'm going to go to the terrain and the road work, and maybe this is, let's see, and this paved area that is part of the terrain. And I'm going to lock these. So I'll go to the edit menu, locking, and lock them. Okay, you'll see the handles turn gray. It's a little hard to even see them in here, but now I can't move them. Now I'm going to go and select everything else here. And I think I can go to the edit menu, move, elevate. And let's say that I wanted to make it, I'll just do it dramatic. I'll make it 10 feet taller. Okay, so you can see the building moved up. Now we did have a problem here. You notice these windows and doors didn't move up. Why? Because they were locked in relationship to the story, and the story level did not move up. Okay, now there are different ways you can lock in windows and doors. You can say it's in relationship to the wall, or it's in relationship to the story. So let me undo that and show you one type of fix here. I'll undo here. I'm going to select all the windows and say that in general, I want the anchor to not be related to the story. I want it to be related to the wall base. Now I believe that when it does that, it does not move anything. It just simply records where they are in relationship to the walls. And I'll do the same thing with the doors. I'll select door, select all doors, and I'll say that the doors here, all the doors, and I'll say their sill is going to be related to the wall base. All right. So now the model still is intact. Now if I go select everything, select all, and elevate, and I have to say 10 feet. Now the building moved up. Site did not change. Of course, maybe the reason you're doing it is because you were buried in the site or you were too high. you know, above the site or something like that, and you needed to adjust it so you wouldn't end up with it floating like this, unless you were throwing in another story below it or something like that. Okay, now there is an issue with this approach here, and that is that now when I select, say, a wall, and I look at its settings, while it says that it's, you know, now it's 135 above sea level, that's no problem there, and it's 10 feet, well, actually it's 9 feet tall, you know, that's the height of the wall, but it says that it's 10 feet above the first floor. So in other words, the floor level hasn't changed, and when we go to a section, we're going to see something really odd here. So if I go to a section here, you can see these floor levels have not changed, and the building has moved up. And I'm not quite sure what we're seeing here. Oh, those are the zones. The zones were not turned on at the moment that I moved things, so the zones actually stayed below. So that's the other thing, is you have to make sure you have all the layers turned on. All right, so how would we get these story levels adjusted? Well, I could go into the, what do you call it? The story, any of these story ones, and say, let me look at the story settings. And I could say the first floor is up at 10 feet. Now let me just say, if I put this at 10 feet, then you can say, it says, all right, that means that the next story is only, is right at the same height because you just moved this one. I'll say that it's still 10 feet to the next one, and that'll take all of these up. Now the foundation probably should be moved up 10 feet as well. So what this is going to do is going to move all of these up. But the problem is that when I do it that way, while these story levels move up, the building elements move up as well. And in fact, the terrain mesh would move up with it. This has some issues doing it this way. So let me, fortunately, I can just go and say that it's going to be 0. Let's see, I'm going to make -5. And this is going to be 0 and 10. And this will put it back to where we were a minute ago, where these levels were lower there. So now we still have the problem that we've raised the building up and it doesn't have the right relationship to the story levels. So what, I'm not going to be able to finish all the demonstration. What we'd want to do, ideally, if you want to change the height of everything, is you'd want to, if you want to leave the building design where the stories match the building structure, you would want to change the relationship to sea level. So, you know, like I showed earlier, you know, I want to make it 5 feet higher, 5 feet lower, whatever. So you change that, and then you compensate by moving the grade element, the mesh, an equivalent distance. So what happens is the story levels still are related to a project 0. The walls and building elements are still related to that same place. They essentially haven't moved. We've told it to be a different height, and we've moved the terrain to coordinate with that height. So that would be the ideal way to do it. Now let's see, David Uguchi. Let me just open up your line, David, and then we'll have to move on shortly, but let's see if I can get your line open if you have. So David, your line is open. Okay, I'm going to read your next question. I don't know if you have a, hey, David. I can hear you. Okay, so David, I heard you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So you said if for drainage purposes, I might need the entire building to be 1 foot higher than it currently is, how to raise the entire building 1 foot. So what you'd want to do, if you want to keep the floor levels in relationship to the story the same, then you have to think about it the inverse. If the building was 1 foot higher in relationship to grade, let me move the grade down 1 foot and tell Archicad that the project location is now been, adjusted by a foot. So that's what you would do, is you would say, hey, I'm going to move the grade down, by 1 foot. So the building is 1 foot higher in relationship to grade, and I'm going to tell it how to calculate where sea level is in coordination with that.
Well, my thinking beyond on this is that when you locate the building, you set the project location at a certain height, which becomes project 0. And why can't you just change the elevation at the project location thing, and that would automatically change everything, because you're not changing.
I did that first, and it works beautifully. And then you just need to adjust the terrain mesh, because the terrain mesh, if you've already built it, is based on its relationship to project 0, and you need to move it so it has the proper relationship to sea level. So yes, you can simply say, let's go from the other direction. I want it to be 1 foot higher, therefore I'm going to change my project 0 to be 1 foot more. Essentially, project location, I'm going to say sea level is down an extra foot, so that the building is 1 foot higher officially, and then you have to just adjust the terrain that same distance.
So could you just take your whole terrain mesh and elevate it 1 foot less?
Yes. Yeah. So let me just go and what I'm going to do to simplify this, I'm going to open the original version of this project here, not saving any changes. So that way we'll be, back to, a project that's sort of, reasonably set up. Aside from the fact that I corrected those.
So what I'm getting at is that you could change your project location to be 1 foot higher, and then you can manually go into 3D and select your mesh and lower it 1 foot lower.
There you go.
And
that'll work. Yeah, so we'll do that. Now that I've demonstrated a couple of things that sort of work but have some drawbacks, we'll take this one, which is probably simpler. So here we have, it's not quite ready. There we go. Okay, so again, if I were to measure this right now, this point here is -1.4 foot on the Z, which is in relationship to the, what do you call it, the building. And let's say I wanted the building to be 1 foot higher, but I want to keep the story levels all working. What I do is I go to the options, project preferences, let's see. Maybe, can I do project preferences? No, I can't do it in 3D. All right, interesting. I'll go to floor plan, options, project preferences, location settings, and say, you know what? Instead of it being, come on. Why is it taking so long? Project preferences, location settings. There we go. Instead of it being 102.67, I'm going to say we're going to move it up 1 foot, 103.67. Okay, nothing changes here. Nothing will change in any of the views. But when I go to 3D, if I want to have this be the terrain, I take the, the things that are, select.
Well, one more thing then is if you could actually go in, select the mesh for the terrain, go into the selection settings on that, and select you're tied, like you're pointing out, is that it's tied to a story, just like any other part of the project. If you go in and it's set to home story is first floor, and your project 0 is -2 feet,
you could change that there.
You could change the project.
I'm going to do multiple elements here just by selecting all the related ones like the road and other hardscape, and I'll just say move down 1 foot, and these will move down 1 foot. The building now still, is in the proper relationship to, so if we go to one of the sections, we will see the section.
Yes. Okay, and then so all the terrain still stays relative to sea level, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I was confused as to, I always thought that setting things to sea level or whatever was actually tied to sea level, but it's actually tied to project zero. And that was confusing to me.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if we look at this terrain mesh and the piece that we're seeing right now, the terrain mesh has a relationship to project zero, in this case 2'4" below the there, and it was 1'4". You may recall that I had it 1 foot.
Yes. Yes.
So
Okay, that's clear.
yeah. Okay, so I have some other questions I want to try to get to, but thank you, David, for an interesting challenge and, you know, demonstrating both the wrong ways or the ways that you could do it that have some, you know, issues. So
Thanks, Eric.
now Saxon says, when I do that building lift, I found it can work to lower the grade, which is what we ended up with. Okay, there, and note this for, okay, Saxon had a question. Let's see. All right, so Saxon, trying to get a high res JPEG. All right, let me open up Saxon's line. So more of my old clients. We're all getting old, I suppose. David, well, both of you probably have known for 20 years. So Saxon.
Older and wiser.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so you had a question here, trying to get a high res 150 to 300 dpi JPEG from a 3D view, and it seems hard to do. Okay, so let's take a view here in 3D. All right, so when we're in the 3D window, I've got a resolution on my monitor, which, you know, is being broadcast through GoToWebinar, so, you know, it'll be potentially a little different on yours, but it has a certain resolution. Now, as I zoom in on something, it, of course, fills in the gaps, and it will do its best job possible, you know, as it does that. But if I take a screenshot from out here and zoom in on that after I've taken the screenshot, then we're going to have a, well, very limited, you know, it's going to look very fuzzy, going to look pixelated there. Right. So that's the issue you're coming up with. Now,
let me jump in for interrupt for 1 second. One thing is I'm using the white model with shadows because this is for a coloring book that's going to get printed in our Sacramento AI chapter. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to get clean, unfuzzy, unpixelated lines is kind of what I'm after here.
All right. Now in the 3D view options, one option is white model with shadows like this.
Yeah, right.
Now this is still a pixel-based image, even though it looks like it's just line work. And if I zoom in, it'll make better, more and more pixels to make it detailed. But if I do a screenshot, or if I say save as JPEG, it'll be limited to whatever dots are seen on screen right now, and so it won't be very clean. The workaround for your particular solution is actually fairly simple. We go to the 3D view options, and we go to hidden line vectorial. Now, hidden line or vectorial means that it's going to create line work that is pure abstract information. Now, it takes a little longer to generate, and it may look a little different in part. Well, right now we're seeing transparency through there, and you know, we could turn off the transparency in the 3D window. Let's just do that. In fact, so I go to the 3D styles and say, you know, when I'm doing hidden line vectorial, I do not want transparency. All right, so that changes the setting, at least right now, for this. Okay, so now it looks cleaner. All right, if I save this, if I do save as, instead of saving it as a JPEG, which is going to be have just the resolution we see on screen and will be fuzzy and chunky, I can save it in a vectorial thing like PDF. All right, so let's do PDF. All right, so we'll just do test 3D white model. I'll put this into downloads here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is open up, so let's see, go and get that file. Well, it turns out that when I did the PDF, I wasn't paying close attention to the page size, so it's put it on multiple pages. But you can see how clean and crisp this is, even though I've zoomed in. And if I do even more, you can see it's absolutely clean and crisp.
Okay, so take me through those steps if you could one more time, how you got there, please.
Okay, all right. So we'll go back to the Archicad environment. And this time I'll save it more carefully, saying I want to fit it on one piece of paper, right?
Right.
So now if I do save as, and I choose PDF, there are some options for page options and PDF options. And
Right.
I pass through them. If I go to page options, I can say, what size paper do I want this on? So I'll just say, I guess 8.5 by 11 is considered ANSI engineering. Yeah, 8.5 by 11. And saying that it's landscape, so it's horizontal, which matches there, and with some borders. Okay, so that's the paper size I want. And then PDF options here, you can see it says, oh, well, you're going to need 8 sheets. It says, no, 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 can you fit it to 1 sheet? Here.
Got it.
Okay. And now that I've done that, it will save this entire view in a virtual file, you know, a PDF.
Yeah.
So let's just call this top 3D white model V2 here. I'll say save. And then we'll go and open it up. And it's just, there it is. Open it up. And here is that sheet of paper. You can see that's the sheet of paper. And if I zoom in on this,
That's pretty decent. Pretty decent. And you could then save that out as a JPEG.
you can, yeah, I mean, you would be in, yeah, so I'm in preview. You could be in any tool that opens PDFs, and you can save it out as a JPEG at that resolution.
Gotcha. So can you just go back to your, when you got, I think you were in your on-screen options.
So this is under the view menu,
Yep.
3D view options. We have pixel versions, which generally are very fast, and we have hidden line or vectorial versions, which can take somewhat longer or even quite long, depending upon how complex the model is. Hidden line vectorial will, of course, just be line work, no shading. You could also get it simple shading with here. Now, what's the, that one, of course, is looking very thick lines. Why? Because that particular 3D style currently is set to show contours that have a certain weight. You know, if I were to make it thinner like this, then that weight will be a little lighter.
If I want to stay with the, because I've got the white model with shadows, will
Okay.
that be a problem with that vectorial line work that you were talking about?
All right, let's see. So we're going to go to hidden line vectorial here. So that's the one I had. And then I'll go to the 3D styles and say, can I add shadows here? So sun shadows. Yes, we can add sun shadow on all surfaces. Okay, say okay. Not, oh, well, you know, what we're seeing is just line work here.
Yeah.
That's the shadow there. So of course it's a little hard to tell that that's a shadow. So I'm not sure if what we might want to do here, this would be an interesting combination of effects. Let's go and say simple shading with shadows. So that's going to be with the shadows. We can see those, but we want it to be white just with shadows. So instead of relying on this, which can, you know, I think the shadow was all white, you know, I'm going to go in and say I'd like to make a white model with the graphic override.
Oh, interesting.
All right. Now, we do have some heavy borders and some thin borders, and I'm not quite sure what the difference is. So let's just see what we've got. You can see thin ones and thick ones. Now this is interesting because it's almost like the way, you architecturally would say, hey, if it's against the sky or whatever, we want a heavy border, but we do have this other thing, and it has to do, I think, with the pen weights. So let me just go now to say this is all black, some gray. If I were to say Archicad layout pens, is that doing anything? Did not change. Oh, did not change. Let me go to the all black, some gray, and let's just see if I can override this. Now, it might also have to do with on-screen view options. Whoops. No, it doesn't have. There's no bold things that they're not on in 3D. But let's go to our pen. Where is it? Pen sets. And say, let me just create a new variation of it. I'm going to select all the pens by shift clicking from one to the end and say the pen weight in millimeters is very thin, 0.09, something like that. This is now a custom pen set I'm experimenting with. We'll say OK. Still seeing, of course, it's, wait, now I was thinking about it. No. But it's still got some differentiation. So why would this be? Because we're seeing it on the edges here, but not this edge. So I'm not sure, what's going on there, why some things are thick and some are not. Now the white model, if we go here, white model cut and uncut here. So uncut is, we're saying line marker pen, yeah. That's a pen 2. Yes, that should be thin there. And the cut, I don't think, pen 22. Let's just say pen 2. I don't know. Let's just try that. I don't think that's going to make a difference because these things aren't really cut. So what would cause some of these lines? Now it's interesting. You can see that the upper line here is heavy. And lower, it's showing it when there's a gap against things. So here, this is an internal line, and this is an external line. So in fact, it is being smart. It's saying
that profiling.
Yeah. So I've never noticed that. That is weird. Now let's just see if there is something in the 3D styles that says that. So we have show contours best, silhouettes. Silhouettes. I said make it thicker, but for your what do you call it? For your purpose, maybe it's I had never noticed that. That is interesting. So let's say okay. Look at that. Okay. So
wow.
So now the only other issue that we have is that although it says white model, it is somewhat gray, right? Here?
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing I'm going to look at is under the 3D view options, 3D projection settings. Right now, the sunlight, we've got it as 100% in all sides, so it's as bright as it can be. But where is the sun? Well, the sun is behind us here. Let me just move the sun around to here, just see if that affects it. Well, it did affect it, but not, not necessarily the right way, because it's basically, we can see this is in shadow, that's in shadow. So the fact that we have shadows turned on means that we're getting some darkness. So we may be stuck at this point where regardless of what we do.
Understood. But I think that what you explained in terms of the vectorial line work, that could get me over the hump in terms of getting the resolution I need for this. And I may just need to let go of the need for shadows.
Yeah.
Now, high school coloring book, so we may just let the kids figure out the shadows.
Well, there is that. Now, the other thing that you could do is once you've got this exported and you put it into a photo tool, you could do some sort of threshold thing where if it's lighter than this dark, than this shadow, make it white. We literally can, in Photoshop, say I'm going to posterize it. I'm going to say anything lighter than this will make white, anything darker than that, maybe I'll leave unchanged, or I'll, so you could do that. And that would be a graphic artist could do that in, 1 minute once you experimented with it. So you might have to do post-processing of these images, I don't know how many you're doing, but if you had 20 of them, it might take another hour or two, which wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, no, just one, really, just one or two of these. So that's great.
All right.
Very
Yeah,
good.
so that, let me just see that if I go to, so save as here. So we'll just go white model version 3 here. And now I'm going to open it in Photoshop as opposed to preview, because in Photoshop I can do that threshold. And I'm going to see if maybe I can at least demonstrate a quick way to do that, because if I'm right, it literally will take me 1 minute to do as soon as the program opens. All right. Now, Doug Muir says you can get a large sheet size in rendered view. Yes, if you wanted to render, Doug, using the photo rendering settings, you can. It takes longer, but of course, Saxon, you may only be doing a couple of images, so the time is not a big issue.
Right.
But let's see, I have Photoshop open here. I'm going to tell it to open that last PDF. So here, this one. And when you open a PDF, let's see, so here's 300 pixels per inch, and I'll say that it's not going to be the bounding box, it's going to be the media box there, or I don't know, sometimes crop box. Can't remember, art box. Okay, well, I think this is, it doesn't matter, I'll say media box here. And this is how big it's going to be in terms of pixels, so it'll have plenty of pixels there, 300 pixels per inch, so we can set that. And we'll just say, okay, well, what happens when we do that? So you can see this pattern here. That's saying it's transparent. There's no data here. I'm going to just put in a new layer behind it that I'll just fill with white. So I've got white in here, and I'm just going to use a command to fill it. So now we can see, that. Now, if I go to this layer here and I add an adjustment layer for levels here, so you can see this little picture here.
Yep.
And that picture indicates what it's seeing behind here. Now, if I can say that anything that's lighter than a certain color is white, you can see this has all gotten whitened. But I've lost some of the resolution, so I'm going to move this up. So by tweaking this a little bit, I can, and let's just zoom in on this. I think if I zoom in, you can see I've still got line work.
Yeah.
Here. And by changing this, I can get it lighter and lighter.
I see that.
And so there may be, someone probably could figure this out where it ends up being functionally white with outlines. Now this is, we're seeing it so thin because that line work was infinitely thin. So anyway, there are some things that we might need to experiment with to get that. But, and it does look a little pixelated right in here, although other stuff, not so much. But if we go out, it's not so. So anyway, that would, you might have to do something like that to be able to retain some shadows, but have the white. But of course, this is medium gray, and I'm not quite sure. If I make that white there, so now I'm getting it virtually white except for shadows, right?
Right. I think the way you had it before was okay because you had enough whiteness on those areas there.
Yeah. So anyway, you can play around with this and experiment with output. When you print it, what does it look like there? So there may be some other settings in Photoshop that might do this even more intelligently or something like that. All
Great.
right. So
Very
we
good.
are well over the 2-hour mark. I want to thank all of you for joining. We've still got 70 people on the line. I know that there were some other questions typed in. Okay. So let's see. Let me just see if I can answer just briefly. So Mark Hessa, are you still here? No, he's not. Okay, so I'll skip that question. Thomas Pisaris. Thomas here. Yes, you are. Okay, Thomas, you said windows and complex walls display properly in plan, but not in sections or 3D. They appear outside or inside the wall line. Okay, that's a relatively simple question to answer. So let me do this one as the last one. It is not intuitive in the sense of I wouldn't have figured, well, I might have figured it out, but somebody else pointed it out and I said, oh, that's how you do it. So Thomas, your line is open and this will be the last sort of real question here. Okay, so let's go to my AXO here. So Thomas, your line is open. Hope you're still around. Your microphone, you're still listed. Okay, so I'm going to go in and demonstrate this. Let's see, how do we see this? Okay, so let me take, why am I? All right, so I'm going to drag a copy of this wall, drag a copy out, and just okay. Here's this. All right, now this wall here is a complex profile. If I go in to edit the selected complex profile. So Thomas, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. So what you'll see is that the outside of the wall, if I select this, you can see a couple of dots here and stuff like that. This bottom part of the wall is set as generic exterior. Let's see. I think. Okay, I'm not quite sure. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to demonstrate. Let's see if I make this have a bump out. Okay, and see that's the opening. That's a line here. Okay, so let me just apply this. Oh, actually, I wanted to, yeah, and it's stored it here. Okay, so if I go back to 3D, and there we go. Okay, so this door is still sitting properly in the wall, and it is because, no, this is a sitting sill to wall base. So this is working properly now. I wonder if they've changed it. It used to be that if you said that if you had the sill here and the sill was wider, like the wall was thicker here, that this would pop out. Now let me just look on the plan because I think maybe sometimes the issue is only seen on the plan and not on 3D. Now, where is the? It should be this one here. Oh, here it is. Okay. No, this is looking pretty good. So, I wish I had a dramatic example to show because I know what your issue is that the wall, the door would either expand the frame to go out to here, and therefore sort of have this weird looking frame in 3D and in plan, or just move, something like that. And the solution, now maybe they fixed it in version 26. The solution was to say, you know what, although I know that I want it to be 0 relative to the wall base. I actually would prefer you look at the height of the header relative to either the story or the wall base, which in this case is 6 feet 8 there. And that would then say, oh, well, how thick is the wall at that point, at the head? And it'd say, all right, well, I'm going to fit the door in based on the anchor. So that was the solution that I was shown, and I went, oh God, I would have never experimented with that to say what's the anchor point here. So check that out, but it does seem like it's working. There, I'm just going to go, let's just undo this, just do one more thing. If I created this, I modified this wall on the fly. Let's just see if it's, if I use a different wall type. We have AMT wall without stone base, and do I have AMT sample stone base wall? Okay, that's still working properly. So this one, if I just show in 3D, you can see this. Earlier, what we had in other versions of Archicad was this door would pop out based on the thickness of the wall. Is that what you're experiencing, Thomas?
Yeah, it's out in space.
Okay. So if you're in versions before 26, the solution was to say, you know what, this door. Oh, actually, let's put it into the sill to story 1 here. Okay, look at that. So there was a subtle difference here, but it still looks fine. I mean, it's still clearly related to the main part of the wall. But in version 25 and earlier, or the last time I checked anyway, if it was anchored at the sill, it would get messed up. And of course, at the head, in this case, is simple. Now, the other thing that you need to do just in general for these walls, and let's just switch to the one that I am now using, the stone-based wall here. So it's a little bit more detailed here, is that you need to have opening reference lines. Let me just design layer, opening reference. Turn this off or on. You can see that there's this line here. This basically says, where is it what are we measuring from? Let me turn off all of the other things so we can see just that. So these 2 lines are the opening reference, and basically this is, the thickness of the main part of the wall here. Okay. And so you definitely, it was always, the idea was you would have these lines saying, where are we measuring from when I say it's at the face of the wall or it's inset, whatever. So you'd always make sure you had this here active. Now, but what I found was frustrating was it ignored that if you had stuff sticking out, if your anchor point was down at the sill, it would say, oh, your wall is really thick. And I say, no, please use that opening reference line I gave you, and it would ignore it. And so the answer was, well, tell it to look at the head. So that's what happened there. But it looks like 26, they fixed it.
Okay, so one of the wall sections I'm using is the foundation, one of yours from the AMT selection. And so maybe that the width of the footing down below, it's taking that for the width of the wall as opposed to the actual width of the wall.
So if I go to, one of the footing ones here, so let's see, profile, foundation footing, sort of a simple, well, actually that's not one here, stem wall single. All right, so normally you don't put in a door into a wall like this, but of course, if you did make it tall enough, you could, or maybe you're using a slightly different one or whatever, but you can see there's no opening reference. If I turn that on, you can see the reference is now out here, those lines. So if we were to put in an opening into this, we want this to be moved into position. So those are the opening lines, which we can hide or show in our working view here, but this activates it.
Okay.
So if you have something that it has a big spread footing and then it goes up and you're putting the door in up above, then you just need to make sure that you have the opening reference lines indicated. And these lines, actually, they can, you can have them on an angle, you can curve them, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can actually create, more of them. I think you can drag copies, so
Okay.
this one, so you can, have a lower and an upper, so depending upon what's appropriate there. This line here right now is, well, it says that it is uniform settings. Oh, I think if I turn off, yeah, so you can tell just by the layer, it's, but when it shows, it doesn't actually say line category here. But anyway, so you can draw lines and if we were to go to the line tool.
The opening reference line refers to any opening door or window. It's for the
Yeah,
opening itself.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's interesting.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, this is design drafting. There we go. Okay. All right. So when you draw it from scratch, it's going to go on the drafting layer as a line. But if you copy one of the ones that's an opening reference, then you can have more than one. Or I think you can even, if I select this, I think you can modify it. You can make it's a polyline essentially here. But generally what you want is just, the simplest thing is just it should go up, as high as the wall is, as high as the opening would be.
Okay. Maybe it's not tall enough.
That could be, yeah. So you want to just say how should Archicad calculate the opening face based on this line?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, all right. So we're 2 hours, 20 minutes. I'm gonna finish this up. Thank you for joining me. If you are interested in any Archicad training, coaching, consulting, feel free to reach out to me, support@bobrow.com. If you are interested in being part of my coaching program, where for a very nominal monthly fee, you can get sessions like this and even give me a project to open, you can email me, I'll give you directions, or you can go to archicadtraining.com/coaching. We'll take you to that. And if you just buy my training program, you do get coaching as part of it. And finally, if you are interested in Master Template or have Master Template and want to, help me either figure out the optimum simple version or the optimum fancy version with all the bells and whistles that we can put in, please reach out to me because I'd love to get your input. So thank you all for joining me for this special Ask Me Anything Archicad user presentation. Take care.